Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. This is Dr. Andrew Rimby, and I am so excited to be joined with an author who has a very storied career and an exciting career. So I'll introduce that aspect of him first, but I'm joined with Rasheed Newson, who is a writer, producer of Bel-Air, which is currently streaming on Peacock. Um, the Chi and Narcos. He currently resides in Pasadena, California, with his husband and two children, who I know before I hit the record button, he had just sent off to school. So uh, nice and probably quiet now in the household. My Government Means to Kill Me is his debut novel, and I'm going to hold it up here. It's a beautiful pink, black, rainbow texture on the front cover. And it's actually My Government Means to Kill Me, a novel. And the only reason I'm going to say a novel is because we're going to dig into the genre of his book, which is a very intersected blending of genres, which I love. So, Rasheed, welcome to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, so right away, I just have to ask you, how long have you been in the Hollywood, the film, the writing industry?
I moved out here a year after I graduated college. I was like 22, and so it's been half my life at this point. I'm 44. In LA, it's pretty much the only job I've ever had. I've been an assistant at pretty much every lot. I worked as a production assistant on a couple shows, like the Bernie Mac show. And then I finally got into the writer's room when I was like 29. I got my first job as a staff writer on Lie to Me. And so I've been a member of the Writers Guild for 15 years.
I loved the Bernie Mac show. Oh, I miss Bernie. Okay,
I will
but
say I was there a very short time. I was there for a showrunner who only lasted a few months. And I lasted even less time than that. I was the assistant to the showrunner. And I'll tell you how he fired me. I once heard someone telling this story at a Hollywood party, and I turned around and I said, that was me. Um, I was working very hard to please this person who had a list of demands that were as long as my arm. And on the day they fired me, they said, Rasheed, on a scale of 1 to 10, I think you're a 9, but I really need a 10. And with
wow.
that, I was fired.
Well, did you? So I'm assuming you grew up in the Northeast just because of your book, but you may not have. So, like, where do you originally hail from?
I come from Indianapolis, Indiana,
Wow. Okay. So not New York City. I
not
had
New York.
pinned you as a New Yorker. Um, so was that always this Midwest then dream of I'm going to land in the glitzy Hollywood
Not
backlot
really.
studio?
Not really. I mean, when I was growing up, I wanted to be, I showed a talent for writing, and people told me, you're going to be a lawyer. That's what that meant in the Midwest. Oh, you'll be a great lawyer. And I thought, well, okay. And I went to DC. I attended Georgetown, and like law was sort of on my mind. And I also enjoyed politics and advocacy. So I worked for a lot of nonprofits, writing press releases and reports and ghostwriting speeches for the leadership. So writing had a real use in my work life out there. But then the creative side of writing was always sort of interesting to me. And in college, I fell in with all the kids making short films. So I thought, well, I'll try it. And I really came out to LA thinking, well, I'll give it a year or two. I could always go back to DC if this didn't work out. And I ended up sticking around because I always believed that success was going to happen in like the next 3 months. You know, every time I thought I should pack it in, I was like, well, no, you've got that contest you entered. Let's see if you win that, I mean, you should stay. So eventually it did work, but it took, 7 years before I got my first writing job.
Well, you're an executive producer of Bel-Air, so I think it did work,
It did work
Rasheed.
out. It worked
It did
out.
work out. I mean, but like you've said, you've had a journey and you didn't instantly become an executive producer. Like I
No, and even and
usually, yeah.
if at 22 someone said it's going to take 7 years, I might have thought differently about it. I might have also thought differently about it if someone had told me that, President Obama was coming. I left DC during the the second Bush's second term, and I didn't necessarily see Obama on the horizon. And then years later, I had friends who worked in that administration, and I thought, well, I could have done that if I had stuck around. But I'm happy with my choice.
So how do you find the LA, the writing scene? I mean, I always have these nostalgic views of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Sunset Boulevard, even without the death at the end, um, of those writers that just the frenzy in the air. Like I think that's just our image, even from the Northeast, because we have views of Hollywood and how it differs from New York City culture, or even, Philadelphia. Like it's just a very different city. Um, is it a place where, now with your debut novel, you feel really supported when it comes to the creative writing, even when it's outside of the film TV industry?
Well, yes, that was. I mean, that was part of that was very lovely. I mean, the book came out, and there were a lot of my friends who worked in TV, work in television, in front of the camera, behind the camera, came out and were very supportive and lovely, and helped give the book a real boost. It is though very clear to me. I mean, at this point, like I said, I've spent half a lifetime out here. I am more Californian than I probably am, a Hoosier anymore. I love this atmosphere. This is where a lot of the big dreamers come to make that happen. There's just an abundance of talent. I tell people the only sad thing about Hollywood, one of the sad things about Hollywood, is there aren't nearly enough jobs for all the people who are deserving, and that has its own frenzy and its own anxieties attached to it. But by and large, it's a good community, and it's more of a community than I think people imagine it to be. Um, I mean, I think the sign of our unity was just sort of there for the world to see during this strike, which we won. So we do have it's not as cutthroat, I think, as sometimes the movies make it out to be. It can be competitive. It is competitive when we want a job, but that isn't all of our lives. I mean, every successful writer I know has several sides to them that have nothing to do with writing.
What do you mean by that, Rashid?
Well, they have other interests. I mean, they're not always, we don't just always talk about the business every time we get together. My writing partner, TJ Brady, is great at fly fishing and surfing. I am a minor art collector. And, I'd say like you do have other parts of your life that you're really into.
Well, because you did bring up the writer's strike, something that since you are, sitting virtually across from me, I feel that we could gain so much from your perspective and your industry knowledge, which is just, I was curious whether you think the writer's strike and SAG-AFTRA strike, and even now the automobile workers strike,
Yeah.
like it just seems that strike is in the air. There's something, it's not just tied to the Hollywood industry. It does seem like it's rippling, right? In
Well,
my opinion, it's Hollywood is the um an emblem in a way of America's frustrations or the workers' frustrations, you
I mean,
know.
I think workers in general are very much aware of how they're being exploited, and they're tired of being patted on the head and told, well, this is just the way it works. I mean, when you pay the people at the top 300 times what you're paying the people who do the work on the factory line or create the thing you're selling, that's just grossly out of whack. And it's weird to watch those people make so much money and spend so much money and then claim poverty when we want a pay raise that's anywhere near in line with what they're receiving. Um, I think people were driven to this point in large part because even the salaries we have had weren't giving us the security we deserve. And in a lot of ways, going on strike wasn't that much more harrowing than how we had been living from job to job.
Mm. Well, even in academia, like I just got my PhD, so I feel I'm processing and synthesizing my experience, which was full of highs and lows, a lot of highs for my own authentic journey, but it also gave me this entrepreneurial spirit to go against the grain. But academia has its, like every industry, it's that same um, toxic work culture in a way of those at the top. You're seeing their lifestyles and just thinking, wait, but why do we have all these adjunct faculty, or why do we have exploited contracts with, professors or
Well,
yeah.
and tell me if I'm wrong, but I think what the common ingredient in all of these places is the institution says to the worker, "You're lucky to have this job.
Mhm.
You're supposed to take this abuse and this low salary for the glory of working at our institution." No, no, no. You put this on your resume, and down the road, it'll all cash out. And it doesn't. You just go from one institution to another, where they're just like, where they all sort of go, "Well, aren't you happy to be, that we're letting you do this?" TJ and I've had job offers in our career where they wanted us to, sort of go back a step or hold at the same title, or didn't want to pay us more. And their excuse was, "But you get to work on this beloved franchise. You get to work on
Mm.
this lovely, sort of property. And it's hard, but you have to go, no. How about you'd be lucky to have our talent reanimate that thing? And this is what we're going to get paid." It's amazing that, when you're at the very beginning of your creative career, when people are making short films and it's just a guerrilla crew, sometimes at that stage you'll say, "Look, I don't have any money to pay you, but this will be good for exposure, and you can put this on your credit." And that's when you're funding things on your credit card. To have these multi-billion-dollar institutions essentially say the same thing: "I can't pay you what you're worth, but this will be really good exposure for you," is ridiculous.
Yeah, I remember when I was asked to do this course at the university for like adult learners, and I was trying to negotiate my salary, and I could tell that the person who um was asking for my assistance as a PhD student was surprised that I was even able to negotiate. Like, I think was so taken aback because it was coming from that mindset, like you said, Rasheed, of, well, you should just be happy you asked. And I said, well, I'm at the end of my um program, and this is how much you get paid for a course like this, and this is my um negotiating salary. And I ended up not having a follow-up conversation, and I was okay with that because eventually I've figured out my self-worth is more important, and my projects that I'm invested in are more important than feeling like I'm being used by an industry, which, is why I now can sit with you and have this conversation. Again, it's not like the university is not part of my life, or that I can enter back into it. I just think for my own peace and security and happiness, I needed to go into an entrepreneurial way. And it does, in my opinion, um, help others see that you can do things with academic expertise that doesn't just involve the university. So,
I'm,
oh,
I
yeah.
mean, I'm curious to see here in Hollywood what it's like when we start making deals, on a one-on-one level for our projects going forward. Because something I thought happened during the strike, which was really nice and unexpected, is people started being very candid about what they were paid. And that's important because, we've all sort of been taught that it's crass to talk about money, and we don't do that. And I'm from the Midwest, we never mention money. But because we're not having those conversations, the institutions, the studios, the networks can really manipulate us because we're not informed. And so I had heard, "Oh, well, this studio never pays showrunners more than this."
Mhm.
And other people are like, "Oh yeah, I heard the same thing." And then one person goes, "Well, actually, they tried that with me and I refused, and they paid me more." And then you realize, okay, wait a minute. So that's not a hard rule. we could negotiate past that point. Nothing is better than when you can, I mean, when you're in business affairs and you can say, I know you paid so and so as much. When you can point to precedent, they have to come up with another reason. They always come back to you with, we don't ever do this. This is beyond what we've ever paid anybody in the history of show business. And the moment you can say, you can call them on it and say, I know you paid so and so more, they fold pretty quickly. But you have to know that. And I think we come out of the strike having had very candid conversations about not only money, but work-life balance. There's a writer I ran into. She has a clause in her contract that says she is done at 6 o'clock. What?
That's wonderful.
I thought you could put that in the contract. You could go. And she goes, it's great because and now she's not running the show, but she's on a show. And I've been on shows where they're going, you're sitting there going, oh, sorry, everyone, we're going to get the dinner menus. We're going to have to work into the night. And she says, it wasn't enough to just have an understanding with the showrunner. Oh, I've got a family life. I need to leave at 6. Because then you have to go up and say, well, just to remind you, it's 6 o'clock and I got to go. No. It's in her contract. So at 6 o'clock, she doesn't check in with anybody. She grabs her purse, she gets her keys and she leaves. Oh, brilliant.
Well, and those boundaries, like especially those who are listening right now, I'm sure there's so many who are early in their creative careers. And the promise of the carrot in front of you is really manipulative, like you've said. But there's something so freeing about knowing that you can make, and it's hard to say that that security is so prescient in your mind of maybe thinking that you're not going to be secure if you don't go through with a job offer. But like you said, Rasheed, knowing each other's salaries, I mean, that's where the university, we're lucky in a way because public universities, the
That's the public.
salaries are public. Yes. But not everyone talks about it. But I'll actually bring up and say, oh, did you know that like a first year faculty member is making $50,000, which is a real salary? I didn't just pull that out of thin
Yeah.
air. And I'm like, wait, that's when I just took a pause and thought, oh, I'm starting consulting with people, and maybe I could actually pull together that kind of salary and maybe teach on the side at a university just because of the enjoyment of the classroom. And yeah, the work-life balance, that's where I'm glad she has that in her contract because it
And it
could
is
follow
tricky.
you every second.
It is tricky. Like, I don't think you can probably walk in as a staff writer and say, I have a contract and I want to leave at 6. That would probably be very hard. But what you find, even as you go up the ladder, is that there's sort of this effort to keep you feeling insecure. And at some point in your career, it should dawn on you that you are no longer some risk. You are no longer a kid they're taking a gamble on. You are a bankable asset. And that is when I think you can sort of say, this is what my life will be like. I mean, I also will admit that when I was a staff writer, I was not married. I had no kids. My office was about the size of the bedroom in my apartment. And the kitchen, the food at the show was better than anything in my refrigerator. So I was gleeful and happy in the beginning of my career to spend almost as much time. And I was learning so much. I was willing to be there a lot. As I've grown older and grown and risen up the ranks, it turns out I was like, well, I actually don't need to be here and watch them set the lights. I know what that is. I can go home now. So I do think you have to kind of grow into your worth and your power. It is very hard in the beginning, though, I will admit, to just go in and make 1,000 demands.
Well, and I do want to bring up, especially when it comes to boundaries that you set in your life, um, that our identities, I would say, are a major part of how you step into the room. So I don't remember exactly. I think it was the Hollywood Roundtable. I love watching the Hollywood Roundtables
Mm-hmm.
that happen. But Ellen Pompeo had really like spoken up about, being a white woman and like saying that basically calling out the different production companies for saying they were diverse, but really meaning that they'll try to be diverse when it comes to cast, but it wasn't trickling down into the writers or the showrunners or the those in the staff positions. And, I feel that I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask you, Rasheed, like, especially as a queer black man, how is it when like, do you feel that the
Oh,
advice
it's
that you
show
now
to
have?
show, right? I
Yes,
mean,
yes.
there are some shows I walk in and um they're doing what they should be doing. There's a lot of diversity, you feel included, you feel heard. And there have been shows I've been on where I felt like, oh, I'm here for window dressing. You don't stick around very long. You kind of finish your season and you go. There have been shows. I mean, there have been shows where I've been highly insulted in the room and have kind of crossed swords with other writers based on their assumptions. Um, it is a lot of people coming from places. I mean, everybody's coming from their own background, their own history, and a lot of people have blind spots that they don't even know about. And they'll say something, and I just sort of have to sit up and go, "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" we have those conversations. But it's really hit or miss. I mean, I must say, I mean, this is of course a liberal city and a liberal industry. That does not mean it's without its prejudices and its blind spots. And it's it's startling sort of when it comes up, but I've, for better or worse, I've had a whole lifetime of experience confronting it and dealing with it. And so I just do.
Well, and like especially with um I should say especially someone again talking about boundaries of people who try to take your energy. One of my listener or one of the listeners of the podcast said that I was pronouncing a word wrong. So for them, it's especially. Uh Again, I'm glad that they listen. But moving along, I think that what you're really bringing to bear, and this goes into my government means to kill me, is like just the way shows are really starting to transform, in my opinion. Like I'm thinking of a show like Pose, which, in my opinion, is probably my favorite LGBTQ TV show
It's
in the
great.
last 10
Stephen will
years.
be thrilled to hear that. That is wonderful.
Oh, really? Oh, good. Wait, Steven is
Stephen
the
Canal, who co-created that show, I mean, really came up with the idea for that show, and then Ryan Murphy heard the idea from Stephen, and they joined together to bring it to television.
yeah. Well, I thought
But I
it
would think of him as the creator.
yeah, it was executed wonderfully. And I actually might start rewatching because I'm rewatching Queer as Folk from 2000 right now on the podcast.
I
So I might,
saw that. I mean,
yes.
that was a touchstone for me. I mean, I grew up loving that show, and not. It's interesting. I haven't rewatched it in so long. I mean, I'd be curious to see how much of it holds up, and some of the what we'll call the politics of the moment that we just sort of accept it because you're like, well, I've got a gay show. Let me just be happy with it. I'd be really curious to see how that's aged.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think so far we're only a few episodes in, or I've recorded a few episodes, I should say. And you can feel the pulse. I feel so much more of the awakening journey. Like it definitely has that I'm coming out
Mhm.
very um some shock value moments, but again, like you said, this is a touchstone for so many of us growing up, and it was the first uh cable show that came out, or subscription show that came out on Showtime, that really featured all of these narratives. So I think it is interesting though when it comes to like your being, so you are a co-creator, right, of Bel-Air?
Yes.
Okay. So I remember there's the storyline with Ashley, right?
Yeah.
Ashley is 12 years old. Or when at the moment when, she's interested in girls, she's 12 years old. That it's interesting now and exciting. I feel what's so different than Queer as Folk is now we're in the moment of integrating queer characters into mainstream shows.
Yeah.
Um, that even like in the Real Housewives franchises, which I love the Real Housewives, there's like openly bisexual or lesbian women. And, it's not like their show is just about lesbian women in Hollywood, which
But I'll
there
say, I
could be
mean,
that show.
that
Yeah.
was, I mean, doing that on Bel-Air, it took a lot of intentionality, and it was even a struggle. Like we had to very upfront say this is what we wanted to do, that this was going to be a character beginning to question her sexuality and then coming to, sort of land on the idea that maybe she was lesbian or bi, and like what we, even in casting, we had to tell parents because the actress was going to be underage. This is what we're doing with this storyline. We are interested in someone dealing with their sexual identity even before they are sexually active, which is a piece of the story I thought is often missed. Like normally people, this way the stories are told is no one sort of comes into their sexual identity until they fall in love and want to sort of act on it. But a lot of us, before we understood what sex really was, we're already grappling with our sexual identity. We were grappling with attraction, even if we didn't know what grown-ups did behind locked doors. And that's the story we want to tell. So we're like, there's never going to be an explicit scene with this child, but we want to have this conversation. And some families, some actresses took themselves out of the running when they heard that.
Hi, this is Dr. Andrew Rimby, the host and director of the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. I hope you're enjoying what you're watching on the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. So to watch the rest of the episode, head to our Patreon. It is patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room. That's Ivory Tower Boiler Room. And you can watch the rest of the episode on our $5 a month membership called ITBR Student, or join the ITBR Professor membership. It's only $10 a month. You get access to all of our videos. You get access to both of our book clubs, the Ivory Tower Boiler Room and the True Crime and Academia book club. Plus, you unlock all of our other episodes. So at the ITBR Student, you only get access to our weekly interviews and the True Crime and Academia episodes. For $10 a month, you get access to our ITBR rewatches, our Teaches series, and True Crime and Academia rewatches and Teaches series, plus the book clubs. Okay, can't wait to see you all on Patreon. And just a reminder, I also offer consultation services. It is $30 for your initial consultation. You get a 1 hour private Zoom with me, and I will help you whether you want to create your own podcast and or media brand, you want to navigate academia as an undergrad or grad student, you need help with technology as it relates to teaching or media, do you want to expand your social media presence as an artist, writer, podcaster, or academic, or even crafting your public humanities identity, I will help you with my consultation services. You can also find that on Patreon as well. Okay. Thank you all for watching and for supporting the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. Bye.